What if matter itself is not the fundamental building block of our existence? Imagine abstract thoughts coalescing into the intricate patterns of a burgeoning civilization. Visualize cities as organic growths emerging from ancient symbols.
Look around you. The concrete beneath your feet, the steel framing your city. It all feels solid. For centuries, we've operated on a simple assumption. You have a thought, you take physical action, and that action builds reality. This model treats civilizations as purely physical machines. It suggests that empires rise or fall based only on tangible events like harvests or military maneuvers. But these physical outcomes are the results of a deeper process, driven by the invisible forces that govern human behavior. This material-first perspective creates a specific limitation. It focuses effort on fighting the physical symptoms of a system, the laws, the politicians, the borders, rather than addressing the logic that generates them. If the physical world is the result of a deeper architecture, then trying to change it through purely physical means is an attempt to rewrite the end of a story while ignoring the beginning. There is an alternative view. Consider that collective consciousness serves as the primary building block of existence, preceding every tangible event. To understand this, we have to scrap the old model. The actual process of manifestation follows a four-step sequence. Ideas lead to definitions, which shape perceptions and eventually solidify into reality. The IDPR framework. To master the environment we live in, we have to walk through this sequence and trace how an abstract thought condenses into a rigid society. Step 1. Ideas. Where does a concept like a nation, a currency, or a justice system actually exist before it takes physical form? Plato explored this through the world of forms. He argued that there is an ideal, non-physical realm of perfect, unchanging blueprints, and that these abstract concepts must exist before anything physical can be built. In this logic, the tangible items and complex societal systems we navigate every day are essentially reflections, shadows cast by those pre-existing abstract forms. Every concrete building and legal document starts as an invisible seed inside human consciousness. To understand how an idea crosses into our physical space, we arrive at step 2, definitions. This text explains the Hebrew concept of dabar. It signifies a dynamic, generative energy. In this tradition, thought and speech are inherently creative acts that bring things into being, rather than merely describing them. We see a parallel in the African concept of nummo. Here, the spoken word carries a vital force. Naming a thing gives it boundary and purpose, turning a formless thought into a defined concept. The words we choose act as the mechanism that translates abstract ideas into the tangible world. Once an idea is defined, it hits the third stage, perceptions. This occurs when a definition multiplies across a population. Ancient Kabbalistic texts describe a process called emanation. They outline a top-down hierarchy, where abstract energy condenses through specific stages until it forms dense material reality. Modern systems theory illustrates the same principle. It shows that complex structures emerge specifically from the interactions and relationships within a massive network. Applied to human civilization, a nation exists as a complex system of shared perceptions and agreements. The geographical territory is the physical space where those mental constructs are enacted. These shared perceptions act as an invisible blueprint, organizing how we behave and trade long before any physical borders are drawn. This brings us to the end of the sequence, reality. At this stage, collective psychological agreements have solidified into tangible structures. The physical institutions we interact with are the final, hardened layer of the process. Once an idea reaches this physical stage, it projects an illusion of permanence, making us forget its origins in the human mind. The physical environment is the result of collective human thought. This shift in perspective changes how we view liberation, especially in the context of global and African struggles for autonomy. If a social order is defined in the mind before it is built in the world, then protests and policy changes are addressing the output of the cycle. A physical change in leadership alone does not change the underlying definitions the previous system was built upon. Consider the definition of a citizen versus a subject. When a collective consciousness stops accepting the old definition of its own status, the physical structures of the old regime lose their foundation. Liberation begins by overriding the conceptual definitions that hold the current reality together. The path forward involves moving back to the source code of the system. Change the ideas and definitions, and the physical reality that follows must shift to match the new architecture.
Welcome. If you're joining us today, it's probably because you're the kind of inherently curious learner who really likes to look under the hood of how the world actually works.
Right. You don't just want the surface level stuff.
Exactly. You want the mechanics. So we're going to start with a rather mind-bending question straight from our source material today. What if everything you perceive and touch right now,
like the device you're listening to.
Yeah, the device or the chair supporting your weight or the very ground under your feet, what if it isn't quite as solid as it seems? What if matter, the tangible stuff we measure and weigh and bump into, isn't actually the foundational building block of existence?
Which is a huge question.
Right. What if consciousness is?
It's a radical proposition to wrap your head around because for centuries, humanity has essentially operated on a very linear, very mechanical assumption about reality.
We're taught that it goes a certain way?
Exactly. We are taught that the sequence of life goes like this. Thought leads to action, and that action eventually shapes reality. It feels like common sense, right?
Yeah, you think about building a house. You physically stack the bricks, and boom, the reality of the house exists.
Right. But our mission for this deep dive today is to explore a framework from the text that suggests this linear model is fundamentally flawed. It proposes that our shared world, the civilizations we build, the daily lives we lead, they're actually constructed on a much deeper, entirely unseen architecture.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if the whole thought-to-action model is wrong, we really need to understand what is actually generating the physical world around us. So instead of a linear path, text says we're looking at a cascading sequence.
Precisely. We're looking at a core thesis known as the IDPR framework. This framework argues that reality doesn't just jump from a fleeting thought directly to a physical action.
It has to go through steps.
Right. It moves through a very specific layered matrix. It begins with ideas, which then condense into definitions, which then shape our perceptions, which ultimately harden into reality. So IDPR.
I want to make sure we really grasp the mechanics of this because it sounds, a bit abstract at first glance. Let's walk through how this actually plays out in a very ordinary, everyday scenario for you. Take something like a job.
Okay, yeah, that's a great example.
So before you ever walk into a physical office building or sit down at a desk, work starts entirely as an idea. You hold an abstract, culturally inherited concept of what labor is.
But an idea is too vague to act on.
Exactly. So you have to step down to the next level, which is definitions. You assign a strict definition to that idea. For instance, you might define your job as a highly competitive environment where I must struggle to survive and pay my bills.
And that is where the mechanism really takes hold. Because that definition doesn't just sit in your mind, it becomes an active physiological filter.
Right. It moves to the third stage, perception. Because you define the job as a struggle for survival, your brain now perceives every single neutral email from your boss as a literal threat.
Oh, wow. Yes.
You perceive a Sunday evening, not as free time, but with this creeping sense of dread. And finally, we hit the bottom layer, reality.
The physical manifestation.
Yes, that perception literally manifests as your lived physical reality. Your cortisol levels spike. Your heart rate elevates. The physical environment of the office actually feels oppressive to your nervous system. The hard reality of your bodily stress was architected entirely by the invisible idea and definition you started with.
That is a perfect microcosm of how IDPR functions on an individual level. But the true weight of this framework is realized when we scale that exact same mechanism up to a macro level.
Like society-wide.
Exactly. Apply this to how modern nations and massive institutions form. It forces us to ask, what is a nation, really? Is it simply a physical territory defined by geographical borders and rivers and, natural resources?
Well, normally we'd say yes.
Right. But under the IDPR framework, a nation isn't a physical thing at all. It is, first and foremost, an idea.
It starts as a collective agreement in the ether.
Yes, it begins as a shared narrative. A massive group of people hold an idea of who they are, but to make that idea functional, they have to move to the second stage. They create definitions.
Like laws.
Exactly. Constitutions, legal frameworks, cultural norms, and those definitions then dictate the perceptions of the citizens. They begin to perceive themselves as belonging to this specific group, distinct from people who live 10 miles the other way.
Right. Across some invisible line.
And only then, after all that invisible architecture is built, does it manifest as physical reality. The physical borders are drawn, the border walls are built, the monuments are erected. The tangible physical reality of the nation is just the final, densest output of a collective consciousness.
Which is wild to think about. I mean, it frames physical matter almost like the exhaust pipe of our consciousness.
That's a great way to put it.
And what's fascinating is that while this sounds like a very modern, cutting-edge psychological theory, the sources show us it actually rests on ancient blueprints. I mean, humanity has been trying to articulate this unseen architecture for thousands of years.
Absolutely. If we look at ancient philosophy, we see these exact concepts clearly laid out, beginning with Plato's world of forms.
Oh, right. Classic Philosophy 101.
Yeah, but deeply relevant here. Plato posited that there is an ideal, non-physical realm of perfect, unchanging forms. According to him, that abstract realm is the true reality.
And our world is just a copy.
Precisely. The physical world that you and I inhabit, the one we can touch and see, is merely a shadow. It's an imperfect, dense copy of those absolute ideas.
Okay, I need to stop you there and play devil's advocate for a second because my skeptical alarm bells are ringing a bit.
Fair enough. Let's hear it.
If this IDPR framework is real and my physical reality is just a shadow of my ideas, why can't I just close my eyes, visualize $1 million, and have it instantly appear on my desk?
The secret critique.
Yeah. It sounds a bit like we're just talking about magical thinking or wishing things into existence. But my physical reality, my bank account, my rent, gravity, it's incredibly stubborn. If reality is just an idea, why is it so hard to change?
That is the $1 million question, literally. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the ancient traditions actually anticipated that exact skepticism. It is not just wishing things into existence, and physical reality is stubborn for a very specific structural reason.
Okay, how so?
We can understand why through the lens of Kabbalistic emanation, specifically the concept of the Sephirah. The Kabbalistic model describes a process by which the divine, infinite, abstract essence unfolds into the finite material world.
Unfolds in what way? Because $1 million still isn't on my desk.
Right, because it unfolds through a highly structured hierarchical descent. It is a ladder of restriction. Think of it like water vapor freezing into a block of ice.
Okay, I'm following.
At the top of the ladder, the realm of pure ideas, energy, is infinite, fluid, and formless. But as it moves down through the stages of definition and perception, each level condenses and restricts the energy further.
It gets denser and denser.
Exactly. By the time an idea reaches the bottom layer, our physical, tangible world, it has been heavily compressed by the definitions of millions of people over thousands of years. It has crystallized.
So it's not just a quick thought.
No. So changing the physical world is incredibly difficult because you aren't just changing a physical object. You are trying to melt a massive block of ice that has been compacted by generations of rigid definitions.
Okay, that clarifies things immensely. It's not a magic trick where thought instantly becomes matter. It's a ladder of density. Reality is stubborn because it's heavily restricted, compiled thought. But that brings up a huge missing link for me. If the abstract ideas are sitting way up in the top of this ladder as pure vapor, and physical reality is sitting at the bottom as ice, what is the vehicle? Like, how does the idea actually travel down? And the text points out that the answer to that lies in how we communicate, specifically the generative power of language.
Oh, yes. This is a crucial piece of the puzzle. When we look at Hebraic wisdom, we find the profound concept of dabar. Now, we usually translate dabar simply as word.
Just normal speech.
Right. But in this ancient context, it signifies something much more mechanical and powerful. It is a dynamic, creative utterance. It doesn't just describe reality. It is a divine energy that actively generates it.
Which is such a flip from how we normally operate.
Yeah.
We're so used to thinking of language as merely descriptive. Like, I look at a tree and I say to you, there is a tree. I am describing a reality that already exists.
You're just labeling it.
Exactly. But Dabar flips that. It suggests that thought and speech are the active principles of creation. They are the mechanisms that pull the abstract idea down the ladder and force it into a definition.
Precisely. And this isn't isolated to one cultural tradition either. There is a powerful cross-cultural parallel in African wisdom, the concept of nomo.
Oh, right, Nomo.
Yeah. Nomo is the vital force, the creative power of the spoken word. It emphasizes that exact same generative power. The spoken word is the catalyst that brings the invisible into the visible.
Here's where it gets really interesting because, we might be tempted to dismiss Dabar and Nomo as ancient mysticism.
Mm-hmm.
But think about how this concept of generative language operates in a highly modernized, entirely practical way right now.
Absolutely.
Think about modern legal systems.
A perfect modern translation of the concept.
Because, how does a legal system actually function? A judge sits in a courtroom, speaks a sentence out loud, and drops a wooden gavel. The mere utterance of those words literally alters the physical life, the physical freedom, and the physical reality of a human being.
They go to a physical cell.
Yes. They are placed in a physical cage.
Aye.
Or consider a contract. Two people sign their names on a piece of paper, a marriage certificate, or a 30-year mortgage. Those written words, those definitions, instantly and mechanically change their financial physics, their social standing, and where they sleep at night.
It's immediate.
Words are the literal code that programs human behavior. They are the vehicle that turns an abstract definition into a shared perception, which forces a hard reality into existence.
Which raises an important question. Do we have a modern scientific framework to explain how that shared code creates a physical structure? Because we don't have to rely solely on ancient philosophy here. Modern science has caught up to these truths through modern systems theory and the concept of emergence.
Right, because an individual word doesn't build a brick wall. So how do we get from spoken agreements to skyscrapers?
Well, systems theory teaches us that complex phenomena are never merely the sum of their parts. Instead, new realities emerge from the interactions and relationships within a system.
Give me an example.
The classic analogy is water. If you look at a single hydrogen atom, it is not wet. An oxygen atom is not wet.
Wetness isn't in the parts.
Exactly. Wetness is a brand new physical reality that emerges only when those atoms interact as a system. When we apply this scientific lens to consciousness and civilization, we see the IDPR framework in action.
So an individual thought isn't a building, but a massive system of interacting thoughts, definitions, and agreements creates a city.
Exactly. When collective ideas, shared definitions, and mass perceptions interact continuously as a system, they generate massive physical realities. The global institutions we interact with every day, banks, governments, corporations, they are not fundamentally buildings with logos on them.
They're just ideas.
They are complex systems of shared definitions that have physically crystallized through the process of emergence.
There is this incredible imagery we came across in the text that helps visualize this mechanical process.
Yeah.
Imagine abstract thoughts literally coalescing in the air, weaving together to form the intricate patterns of a civilization.
It's a beautiful metaphor.
Picture ancient Hebrew letters, the generative Debar, morphing and expanding over centuries to become the foundational principles of our modern global institutions. Think of it like the roots of a massive ancient tree. But instead of drawing up water, these deep subterranean roots are drawing up our foundational ideas and shared definitions.
We're piling data.
Yeah, they act like a root system pulling up invisible code. And as those roots extend and compile that code above ground, they form the dense physical trunk. The streets, the skyscrapers, the bustling economy of a massive city. The physical city you walk through is really just the leaves on the tree of our collective consciousness. The real processing, the real architecture is happening entirely underground in the roots.
It's a powerful way to visualize history, but more importantly, it fundamentally redefines how we interact with the present. Understanding this architecture isn't just an intellectual exercise to ponder while looking at a skyline. It has immediate practical implications.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? If you were walking down the street or sitting in traffic right now, looking at this incredibly stubborn physical world, how do you navigate it? If reality is built from the top down, ideas to definitions to perceptions to reality, how do you actually go about changing it?
This leads us to a profound redefinition of personal liberation. If our reality is indeed conceived and defined in the realm of consciousness before it ever manifests physically, then the path to true liberation completely changes. It suggests that liberation doesn't primarily begin in the physical, political arena. It doesn't start with arguing over policies or fighting the current state of affairs.
Because if you do that, you're just arguing with the leaves on the tree. You're fighting the shadows on the wall of Plato's cave.
Exactly. You are trying to change reality at the densest, most restricted, and stubborn level of the IDPR framework. True revolution begins much deeper. It begins within the architecture of your own consciousness by working your way back up the ladder.
And the method for doing this from the text is elegantly simple, yet incredibly difficult. You have to deliberately audit your inherited definitions. Let's ground this back in reality. Say you're sitting in traffic on a Monday morning, and your chest is tight with anxiety about the week ahead.
A very relatable reality layer.
Right. That physical anxiety is your reality layer. To change it, you don't just find a new physical job. You trace the feeling backward. You ask yourself, why do I define this situation as a threat? What is my foundational definition of success or security? Did I create that definition, or do I inherit it from a culture that values constant output over human well-being?
And, well, almost all of our core definitions are inherited.
Right. But the moment you interrogate that inherited definition, you begin to dismantle the invisible architecture. If you can change the definition of what valuable work means in your own mind, your perception of Monday morning shifts.
The filter changes.
Exactly. And when your perception shifts, your physical reality, your cortisol levels, your actions, your eventual physical environment has no choice but to follow suit. You rewrite the root code, and a different physical reality eventually grows in its place.
It positions you not as a passive victim of a solid, unyielding universe, but as an active architect of your own experience.
It truly does. We've journeyed a long way from that flawed, linear model of thought leads to action that we started with today. We've traced this invisible architecture through Plato's world of forms, seeing the physical world as a dense shadow.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we explored the generative mechanics of language with the Hebrew dabar and the African nomo, proving that words don't just describe the world, they are the code that builds it. We've demystified why physical reality is so stubborn by looking at the Kabbalistic descent from infinite potential into dense matter. And we've seen how modern systems theory explains exactly how our shared invisible agreements compile into the massive physical structures of modern society.
It is a profound shift in perspective. It means that you are an active node within a massive system of collective consciousness. Understanding the IDPR framework is not just fascinating trivia, it is the very mechanism of personal and collective liberation.
It's essentially the user manual to the matrix we've been living in.
It is. And as we conclude our analysis of this framework, there's a final, rather provocative thought that emerges from all this. A question to sit with as you look around at the physical structures of the society you live in today.
Let's hear it.
If a nation or a global institution or even a system of currency is not fundamentally a physical thing.
Right, if it's just an idea.
If its dense, stubborn physical reality is held together entirely by shared definitions and collective consciousness, what actually happens to the physical structures of a society the exact moment we collectively decide to change our definitions? Does the physical world slowly crumble, or does it instantly begin to reshape itself before our very eyes?
Wow. Now that is a question that will change the way you look at a skyscraper, or a national border, or a dollar bill. We want to thank you so much for joining us on this mind-expanding deep dive today. Keep questioning the architecture of your own reality, audit those definitions, and we'll catch you next time.